Shall we go back to our introductory class regarding palliative care? Have you remembering about the four elements of palliative care like physical care, social care, psychological care, and spiritual care? Today we are going to see the topic about the concept of psychosocial care and its importance and how Pallium India is providing psychosocial support to the family and the patients. Today we have with us an eminent person, Ms. Teresa Varghese. She's working as a medical social worker with Pallium India from 2019 onwards. On behalf of all participants and all our team members, I welcome Ms. Teresa to this session. Over to you, ma'am.
Everyone, and thank you, sir, for your introduction. In the previous sessions, I hope you all have understood what exactly is palliative care and what are the areas in which we really work on, who are the beneficiaries of palliative care, and also during in the previous session, that is on yesterday, you have understood about what exactly we do in home care. That is, during the home care sessions, what we actually do when we visit the patients at home, and how exactly home care helps us in getting more information regarding every single individual. So today, what I will be dealing is regarding the psychosocial aspects of care, from the initial knowledge of what exactly is palliative care and from the field experience of what we do in home care, we are trying to understand what we actually do as part of psychosocial care in palliative care settings. So from yesterday's presentations, I hope you all got an understanding about a brief idea about what exactly is palliative care means. So just having a brief introduction, just rewinding or refreshing the memories, palliative care, it is given to, or it is an approach to improve the quality of life of patients and the families. It's not only for the patients, but also for the families. And the palliative care is not limited with people who are having chronic illness. We will be providing palliative care to individuals who are having a life-threatening illness as well as life-limiting illness. So to say life-threatening includes a disease that can cause death to that person, and a life-limiting illness, for example, is a paraplegic condition where they have a traumatic injury where they'll not be able to move by themselves. So such persons, such individuals are are confining themselves into the house or into the place where they are in. So such people also requires a palliative care where their life quality has to be improved. And what we do is preventing, and we provide relief of the suffering through our impeccable or very accurate assessment. And what we do is like we give importance to not only the physical problems, but also the psychosocial and spiritual issues. So the concept of total pain, it includes that it says that the physical pain reported by the patient. So for example, if a person reports that I am in so much pain or I am in severe pain, it doesn't always means that the person is having a physical pain. It is also, or it may also be compounded by his or her current life circumstances. Here, I would like to introduce a term like social diagnosis. We all have heard about diagnosis, the clinical diagnosis, say it, be it a particular disease, if it is diabetic. So that all means it's a disease. So I would like to mention about the social diagnosis, where we understand the psychological, biological, social, and environmental factors operating on the person in his situation, to see where the situation or where the person is in. In that situation, what are the other factors other than the physical factors? What are the other factors that is affecting the person? So such identification is what is known as social diagnosis. So this is what is the crux of what we have learned on the previous days. The illness related sufferings is much more than physical distress, and the total pain, the concept contains four elements, that is a physical, psychological, socio-economic, and spiritual aspects. The physical aspects include all the ailments, the body aches, whatever you have physically, whatever distress you have got physically, that is included in the physical aspect. Where in the psychological aspect, you will have the stress that you are going through, the sleeplessness that you are going through, the issues that the personal issues, the interpersonal issues that causes stress to you, the grief that you are in. All these concepts comes in psychological aspect. In the socio-economic aspect, why it comes in total pain is because, as we all know, the health expenditure is very high for a person who is having hospitalized. The expenses will be much more, and they'll have to spend lots of money for that. So a person who is not financially stable, they may not be able to overcome all the situation that they are going through. So the socio-economic area that is to be included in as part of total pain, because that is an area which actually troubles people in getting or in accessing the healthcare systems. So the socio-economic system or the socio-economic part includes the social support systems, including the family, the peer groups, the organization or the community in which they belongs to. All such things are included in the socio part. And in the economic part, it includes the income, what are their sources of income, how do their expenditure goes. So all these things are included in the socio-economic part. In the spiritual part, what we do is like, in the spiritual part is not specifically focusing on the beliefs or God, but it's much more than that. The spiritual part is the part where we discuss about what exactly is the meaning that the person is associating to his life, what are his hopes, what are the concerns, what exactly are the significant individuals in his life. So such things are what are included in the spiritual part. So these are the four aspects of total pain. Coming to the question, where why is psychosocial care important in palliative care? To mention, maybe we will be knowing that for a person who is living with a life limiting or a life threatening illness, or for a person who is having an awareness that I'm approaching death or my days are counted, that is creating a unique stressors and challenges in one's own personal life. We'll not be able to understand such a situation unless and until we are in that situation, because from people who often communicate with us, we get to understand that the unique stress that they are in, or the challenges that they are going through, the anxiety that they are going through, such things are very visible in their facial expressions and in their non-verbal communication. Everything is visible in that. So that are the areas, that challenges, that stresses that need to be addressed. Also, for a serious illness, it disrupts an individual's thoughts and feelings. Maybe they'll be having difficult thoughts. They'll be not having a proper good feeling about their own life. Then maybe their relationships will be affected. And there are families where, the people, maybe it's the spouse or the family, they abandon the person who is diagnosed with a particular illness. So there are relationship struggles and other issues that is happening, like pre-diagnosis and post-diagnosis. There are issues that may happen. So such things are there as part and parcel of serious illness. Then there will be changes in the social and spiritual supports, because as I have told, for a person who is diagnosed with a particular illness, Maybe he is a person who requires continuous hospital visits. So for that, they need to meet a travel. Um, a travel has to be a travel facility has to be there, and the charges have to be given. Then for the hospital charges, for the medicines, there are lots and lots of expenses. So once someone, it happens like, for someone, if they are diagnosed with a particular disease, what happens is that at times the family or the support system, they like slowly they move back from them. They keep a distance from them because they feel like, oh my god, I have to spend all this money for him. So such thoughts happen to people. It's quite natural because every single person, they are trying to meet the ends with their meager income. So from that, if they have to look after another person, it will be a burden for them. So such issues may also happen due to a particular illness that is happening. And as I have said, financial stability may be disrupted, and also the spirituality or the meanings, the hopes for the family, everything will be disrupted because of the serious illness. So as we, along with the addressing of the physical symptoms, these are also issues that the person is going through. As individuals who knows that people are going through these kinds of issues, we as a clinical team, or we as a volunteers or health professionals, we are supposed to look after the psychosocial needs of the person, and we do have to provide care for them. So how do we know, or how do we understand that the person is going through these many issues? That is where assessment comes in. Assessment is always an exploration process. It is where we get to know more about the individuals. It is where we gather information about a person. So initially, when a person comes into our OP setting or an IP setting, what we usually do is like we have an initial conversation with them. We try to understand we more about the person. We try to understand what exactly have made him come to this particular place. Do they know more about palliative care? What is their idea about the palliative care? Such things are explored because initially we just have to know whether the person is having an understanding regarding what exactly they will be going through. So such exploration, such gathering of information happens at the initial time, and it is based on what is being assessed that we plan our goals, and based on that we'll be giving our interventions. From all these things we will be understanding that assessments are gathering of informations, and it is the process through which we keeps on understanding and exploring about a person, and based on that we understand which are the areas that needs to be intervened upon. So based on the need and according to the present need, we will be making goals. Okay, this person is requiring this help, or this particular person requires an assistance to go to the hospital. So based on the need, we'll be planning interventions. So that is how assessment works. The aim of assessment is mainly to identify the problem areas. As doctors or the nurses conducts a physical assessment, what we do as professionals is we do conduct a psychosocial assessment where we get to understand what are the areas that the person is finding struggles, or what are the areas or problem areas that is resulting from the illness. And also how we what how why we understand these things is because we wanted to understand how these issues are creating or increasing the physical pain of the person. We really need to understand the uh, connection between the physical pain that the person is going through and the problem areas. That is how we make up goals and interventions. And this assessment, to sum up, it includes collecting of informations and identifying and honoring the strength, resources, and needs of a individual. To say about assessments, it is never a one-time process. At initial time, what we do is like we collect information, but at that time we are both as strangers. You know, we'll never open up more to a stranger who we find or who we see for the first time. So the informations will be like just basic informations or the surface level informations will be given. They'll be giving up their initial data, what happened to them, just who are there in their family. So such and such details and initial baseline detail or surface level details will be collected by the professional. But what happens is that as we meet them frequently, or as the rapport or the relation between us, between the professional and the individual increases, they slowly start opening up to us. They will try, or they'll try to speak up more. They'll be finding the person comfortable, and they'll start speaking more about their family, the issues they are going through, the concerns that they have. So it happens in the coming or in the future phases, the informations gathered will be much more than the initial phase. So what we have to remember is that it will always be an ongoing process, because the psychosocial needs will be different from the initial time as the course of illness goes on. So there will be changes happening. So we have to take care of that. And during assessments, what help us to understand more details is not a particular questionnaire or not a proper objective type questions. It's not something like that. But what we have to do is, like, we have to have purposeful conversations with them, and we have to have powerful observations. We have to identify what is untold. We can explore what is not expressed. So purposeful conversations are to be required in order to understand more about a particular person and the family or the environment in which the person is living in. Regarding the sources of information, so where should we get this information from? Initially, what usually happens is that it usually is a patient or a caregiver is the one who usually gives information at the first time. And on the next time, on the second phase, what we can do is, like, we can have collateral sources. It can be the friends, it can be relatives, it can be their neighbors, it can be their one of the significant person or a decision maker in their family. So we can collect information from such persons to understand what exactly the individual is going through. So that is what is meant by collateral contacts. Then the third point is the home visits. I hope it has already been discussed yesterday very well, and you have understood what exactly or how exactly home visits help us to understand or gather more information regarding a person. So these two pictures are here, and from this, why I have put these pictures is because the first one is a payment to one of our patients' home, and the second one is also one of our beneficiaries' home. Usually, what happens is that in a setting or in an what we who usually be in a setting, what we think is, like, we ask them to come next week, or if we don't have a time right now, we'll ask them, okay, we'll meet next day. But the thing is, we never thought or we never think about, are they finding difficulty in coming to the hospital, or how they are managing to come to the hospital. We never think of that. For a person who comes from a hilly area, if, for example, if it is a paraplegic person that who doesn't have the mobility for his lower limbs, he has to be carried out. If there is no road accessibility, if the first one is a payment to such a person's home, think about it. Like, we have to, some individuals, there has to be individuals who have to carry them all through this way out to take him to the hospital. For us, it is like very easy to tell them, okay, we'll meet tomorrow, or why can't you come tomorrow? We'll say like that. Maybe it happens, but how home visits, I was trying to say that how home visits help us in understanding more about the person's situation. So if we knew that the person is coming through such a situation, we'll never ask them to come tomorrow, or we'll never postpone the meeting. So that is how we can help a person at to get more accessibility to a health service. And for the second one, what we usually do is, like, we ask them whether you have a home to live in. So they'll answer, yes, I have a home, and it's my own home. It's not a rented house. So that's it. For us, for individuals who just see the person in an OP setting, what we understand is that yes, the person is having a home and it is his own home. But until and unless we explore more or visit, we never understand what is the type of home in which he lives in. So if the second picture is the type of home that lives in, obviously he is a person who is in need of help. But we never understand until and unless we do the home visits. So that is how the proper informations or proper assessments can be done. It can be either collected from the patient, caregiver, from the collateral sources, and primarily through home visits. So I'll be taking you all through a case scenario. Just picture the person in your minds, and we'll be following this. We'll be having discussions, and so the case scenario is a 56 years old lady, Mrs. A. She have been diagnosed with carcinoma in the breast in 2016. She have undergone mastectomy, that is the breast removal surgery. She was referred to our institution for pain management. At the initial time, she looked very anxious that she had no idea about palliative care. Also, she is having comorbidities like she was diabetic since 12 years. She is having coronary artery disease. And in 2019, she had a fall. And due to that, she had a fracture on leg and is unable to walk properly, very properly without support. She is also a widow, and her children are having a very hostile relationship with her. They are having some family issues that they don't like to express it to us. And she lives alone, and that too in a rented house. Go through this particular case scenario and just try to picturize this particular person. Okay, a 56 years old lady is sitting in front of you. She's diagnosed with carcinoma breast. Pain management is required. She's anxious. She doesn't know about palliative care. She don't have an idea where I am in. She is also diabetic. That is, she's not only having just one disease, she's having multiple illnesses. She is a widow. And the children who are actually required to support the mother is having a hostile relationship due to some family issues. And now she lives alone in a rented house. So this is a case scenario. And now let's have a discussion regarding what are the important areas that are to be assessed from the point of view of total pain. So in total pain, as I have mentioned, there are 4 factors: the physical, the psychosocial, the socioeconomic, and psychological factors. So these 4 areas are there. And let's have a discussion about this particular scenario. What are the areas that are to be assessed and can be listed on these 4 different aspects? So the entire team will be divided into 2 rooms where you can break out and discuss among yourself. You can unmute yourself and speak among yourself regarding. I'll be presenting the case study on the screen, and you can have a discussion about what exactly are the areas that need to be assessed. And you can, any one person in the group can list out the issues that need to be assessed, or the issues that you have found from this particular case scenario into four areas. That is, the one is the physical, the second one is the psychological, the third one is socio-economic, and the fourth one spiritual. So under these 4 headings, you can write down your points, what you have understood or what you have understood as the problems. Now dividing into 2 groups. So the discussion time will be 10 minutes. Feel free to discuss among yourself. And by the end of discussion, that is by the end of 10 minutes, anyone in the group, and any one of the two groups can present the points that you have identified.
That.
So
Right.
the pain of isolation, I guess, so you could call it whatever.
And of feeling unwanted.
Yeah.
Also, I think the first part would be the fact that this mastectomy has taken place. It's been a part of her body for so long. Assuming that also depends, how married life has been, how
Right.
The assessment will be that the pain is there. I mean, the diabetic pain, the effect of diabetic is there, that she has to compulsorily take a medicine
Okay.
for 12 years, right?
All
And
right.
she is 56 years.
Right.
So the age is also a concern, because if the diabetes level cannot be fluctuating very frequently, because she has had a history of a fracture. So the fracture leg might cause a problem, because she is
Yeah.
a sugar patient. The healing process will be less.
Yeah.
So there is
Due to your old age also.
Yeah.
yeah, the So that's
Yeah,
what
Hello.
someone's mic is please causing. Yes, go ahead, Vaibhav.
Yes. Economically is very important. When you are economically able, you will hire psychologist, you will hire doctor, you will hire caregiver. When you are not able to economically strong, you will not do anything. This is the biggest point.
Okay.
we cannot actually put priority on economical point because there is a point that she has a hostile relationship with the children. So their economics doesn't fall around.
Please also.
And the last one is a literacy. When you are illiterate, you cannot do anything.
Yeah. I think regarding children, we need to put one more area, emotional area, right?
That will come on the psychological.
Is it okay? Because I think psychological would probably mean a more approach of the physical value of things like money and the stress and I mean, I would
Will
say
be more
emotional would
on
be
the stress of the disease.
yeah.
She's suffering the aloneness. Psychological part will be that.
Yeah,
The aloneness.
psychological part will be the loneliness and the detachment. The feeling of
okay.
being detached.
Yeah. Okay, loneliness. Yeah. Loneliness, helplessness.
Yeah, exactly. And to some extent, dependability also.
Okay, you mean okay, okay, loneliness, helplessness. Okay, because yeah, okay, that's fine.
And one more point I think is there, no one to depend on, help her.
Okay, so that's helplessness, right?
Yeah, helpless. That is correct. The helplessness
is the correct thing. Loneliness, helplessness. Social would be.
Socially, she has a hostile relationship with her children. So
yes.
That is a stigma, right?
Okay, so yeah, so stigma of no family support.
Exactly, right.
Okay. Yeah.
Even from maybe neighbors also can be included, no? Neighbors or friends.
It was said that she lives alone in a rented apartment. So
okay.
That is
okay. So lives alone in a rented apartment.
So there is no social connection actually. Neither friends, neither neighbors, and the children are because that one sentence.
Neighbor will them with few times. Neighbor will them with few times. Hello.
Yeah. Yes. Go ahead.
Neighbor with them few times, only for few times, 1 or 2 days.
Okay. Okay. Lives alone in rented apartment. Okay. Neighbors. Limitation of any neighbor's help, no? We could say.
Yeah.
Limitation of.
Excuse me. I'm Amal Raj.
Yeah, go ahead, Amal.
Yeah, thing is, we've been analyzing the condition of the case or the patient or the lady.
Yeah.
Should we not have a slide because we have only 4 minutes left? Should we not have a slide as to what is our way of addressing this, our citation?
No, I think we are supposed to
assess. We're supposed to do the assessment.
Okay.
Yeah, not because that we have not covered that part of the training yet. I think.
Spiritual. She would be more, like she would listen to more if there is some kind of a spiritual thing for her. Because someone who is alone. So her hope will be only in God.
No, I think
one from the group one can come up with the points that you have discussed among yourselves.
Sure. So I think my name is Nilya, and in my group there was a Veher and a couple of other people, Mr. Anand Raman, Purnendu, Indraji, and others. So can you go back to that slide? Can you put that up, the 4 parts? Yeah. Okay. So my name is Nilya, and I've actually worked with these cases as a psychologist. So very quickly on the physical side, there are going to be so many issues, from the physical pain of the mastectomy to the pain in the body, maybe other issues like constipation, sores and aches in the body. With diabetes, is it controlled, uncontrolled? What are the past medical major surgeries that have taken place and the effects of that after the mastectomy? That's the physical side. The psychological, as a psychologist, and very few psychologists, I think, believe in this. I would really, urge the group to understand that words of depression and anxiety are not to be loosely used at all. They are extremely strong labels, where it has a lot of impact on us. So I would just say that on the psychological side, the patient would obviously, be feeling, how come this has happened and how long is this going to, and I'm going to kind of mix the psychological and spiritual together. So spiritual is going to be more like, why me? Why has God done this to me? Why out of all the people, this again? What more do I have to live for if I don't have a good relationship with the children? What is the legacy I'm leaving behind for my children? Maybe I did something wrong. That is why Meri Banti nahi hai with my family, with my children. On the psychological side, I would not use the word low self-esteem, but yes, we would check for how is she coping. What is helping her to cope with these concerns? Is she worried or is she sad most of the times? Worry and anxiety are different. Sad and depression are two different things. And I think it's very important to explore these small things and see the extremity of these emotions. On the socioeconomic side, of course, who's taking care of the lady, who's paying up for the money, and just also in case something happens to her untowards, like a small thing, like let's say she falls down. Okay, who's going to take her to the hospital? Right now, who's supporting her? And why are they bearing the cost? Maybe it's a friend who's bearing the cost. Maybe it's the children also that came up in the group. So these are primarily some of the things that fit across all the boxes. So I think we need to be really sensitive as we interact with the patients, hold off on our judgments, and really be mindful of the words that we use to interact with the patient, and really kind of explore from experience. These people, from experience again, and I think from some of our lived experiences as well, they're so much stronger than the regular people. I think this is my personal view. Like, going through this illness, it is draining on all these fronts and also on the body. And despite that, having the ability to survive is a story of resilience and strength. So I think we all have something to learn, that we can support others, maybe not take away their pain, but be that listening ear, that sounding board, for this person to really be able to share. Another thing that came up was that maybe this person, because of their relationship with their children, finds it hard to trust people. So how would you create that rapport with with her, and how would you continue to sustain that atmosphere of trust? So in total, those are the elements we touched upon: the physical, psychological, spiritual, and socioeconomic. So spiritual is also God, and religion obviously comes there directly. Anything else, that I missed out from the group? If anyone wants to, please share, do so.
I think we spoke about the rented apartment. So, Nilya, just to remind you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, that too as well, that who's paying for a house, her medicines, and is she having to think about it on a daily, month-to-month basis, or is that something that is covered, and for how long is that covered, right? So it kind of links to, am I being a burden on my friend, on my family, whoever's taking care of me in whatever capacity?
Okay, thank you, Nilya, for presenting. And from the updates, I got to understand that you had a very good discussion among yourself. And from group 2, who would like to speak about the discussion that you have done?
This is Abhijit. I'll be sharing. What we have listed down areas that need to be addressed. So the first is the physical one, and where we noted down some of the points as we could remember from the screen image, which is her breast being removed, fracture, 56-year-old, diabetic since 12 years or so. That was the so that is the physical area. The psychological would be since she's alone, a widow, loneliness, helplessness, fear of future, anxiety, feeling depressed. Social would be the stigma of having no family support. She's all alone, living in a rented apartment, and therefore it would mean a limited help from neighbors. There's a limitation there. That's there. And the social, okay, so the economical would be no money to hire doctor or caregiver. So economically, she's deprived, she's all alone. And spiritual also noted that why God did this to me, why me, a feeling of rejection by God. And also we listed down, I mean, one of the factors that was brought in also was the doctrine of karma, which basically is evident in many religions about, your past sins or your past life or something that his ancestors have done that has been, so that creates a burden, guilt, a feeling of helplessness. And emotional would be hostile relationship with children. Of course, we listed one more area, emotional, because we felt that's different from psychological and even spiritual. It has to do with family, how you feel about your loved ones and how you feel about yourself. So we felt the need to put emotional also. So emotional would be hostile relationship with children and no one calling on birthdays during festivals. So feeling alone and then therefore the tendency to shut herself up from everyone. That's what we felt. So thank you. Thank you everyone for your contribution. That's all.
Thank you, Abhijit. Does anyone else in the group would like to add on some missed points, if there is some?
Yes,
I just have one question, and sorry, this is deviating a little bit. I'd like to understand from you, what do you think is the role of the volunteers after we finish this 5 days of training? I think I may have missed out on this. So if you could help me understand, please, later or now, however.
So regarding that, why we have arranged this volunteers training program is because normally it will not be able for the clinical team or the so-called all representatives of the healthcare professionals will be able to address all these programs. What we actually require is the community has to think that all the individuals in my area are my responsibility. So what we have to do is, like, as individuals or as professionals who are capable of helping the other person, what we have to do is, as community volunteers, we can reach out to the person who are in need. Maybe we can help them to connect them with the resources where they can actually get a relief from their suffering that they are going through. So that is why we are helping you to understand what is palliative care and what are the areas in which, as an individual or as a volunteer, can involve in to help a person. That is why we have arranged this. I hope.
So would you be connecting us to people going through these conditions? Or do we have to find them ourselves? Or if we manage to find, I mean, then we know what to do, but would you be connecting us to them?
I hope it works like as volunteers who have come up and who have showed interest in this particular field. Maybe you as individuals can work on in a place where you are. It's not like we'll be connecting you to a particular area or a particular person. So based on your interest, you can join either a palliative care in your area, or as individuals, you can work out and you can reach out to individuals and connect them with the resources that they are actually in need of.
Got
That
it.
is how it works.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So regarding the discussion that we have, I'm so glad that you all had a great discussion among the group, and almost all the points have been covered from your discussions. I know you all belongs to different areas of work. So from your own understanding, you have discussed a lot, and we have been watching the discussion that you were doing, and most of the participants have actively participated in that, and thank you so much. And so you have divided all the understandings that you have arrived at through the discussion into these 4 aspects. So I would like to explain what we usually do in an assessment. So when we write a particular assessment, or when we take a particular assessment, what we do, or what are the headings that comes under a proper assessment. So our assessment include the initial one as a patient overview. Why we have to understand the patient overview is because we need to understand who the person was. Because, you know, almost in all the scenarios in the hospital settings, we used to call them as a patient, but he was a person, right? So as a person, who was he? That is what we really have to understand. And first, we have to call them by name as always. We'll never call them by their disease or illness. So maybe you have heard about the patient in room number 1, the cancer patient, the differently abled one. We as individuals, we should never use such terms to address a person. We as individuals have to consider every single patient as persons, and that is how we have to approach them. So the initial thing that we understand in an assessment is the patient overview. What was she, or what the person was doing prior to illness, what the person is doing right now. Such information is what is being collected in the patient overview. The demographic details, where is she coming from, what is her educational qualification, such and such details will be collected as part of the patient overview. The second part is the insight. In this assessment, the insight part includes the awareness regarding the diagnosis, the prognosis, as well as palliative care. Because, you know, in a regular basis, if we ask what exactly is palliative care, usually every layman, they will be thinking that, okay, palliative care is end of life care. When a person is about to die, that is the time when palliative care has to be approached on. I hope from the previous sessions you have got the idea that palliative care is not just restricted for people who are dying, but it's also for individuals who are going through such sufferings, or individuals who are going through life-limiting conditions. Even for a person who is diabetic, it is a lifelong illness. A diabetic person is not a person who will be dying after 1 week or another, but that individual is having this particular illness all throughout his life, the entire life. So the illness is actually affecting her social life. That is where individuals require palliative care. So we as individuals have to understand what is the insight of a person. So regarding diagnosis, in such situation, in such conditions, we have seen as the person will not be knowing about the particular diagnosis. At times, the family, they hide the information from the patients, because the family says that no, he will not be able to accept that the particular diagnosis, he'll not be able to withstand that bad news. So please don't say to that. That is what they say. So in such conditions, why we have to explore on insight is because not even by accident we should ask them regarding their illness, or regarding their condition. Because at times what is happening is that for a person who is having stomach cancer, may only know that he is having an ulcer in the stomach. So by chance, if we speak out that, so how is your illness going? Are you receiving a cancer pension or something? Then the person will be like, why should I receive a cancer pension when I don't have cancer? So not even by accident, we are not supposed to speak out such things. That is why we should have an awareness regarding insight. or awareness regarding what is the person's idea about his diagnosis, about its prognosis, how it is going forward. Is he like dying, or is he going well, or is he having a poor prognosis? Such things have to be understood. And mainly, we should try to explore whether the person knows what is palliative care. And if doesn't, we have to explain to them that we try to help you to improve your quality of life. What we do is like, we do the symptom management part, along with your treatment that you have for your illness. We'll be managing the symptoms. So like how we manage the symptoms, we'll be helping you to improve the quality of your life, and we're helping you to go through this particular suffering or illness that you are facing. The third part is the family overview. Why we have to understand this family overview is because only when we understand what exactly is the support system that the person is going through, we'll be able to reach out to them freely. If there is from the family overview, we will be able to understand who exactly the person is living with, what is his or her support system, where or who is the person whom this particular individual is attached close to. So such informations will be collected in the family overview. And in family overview, usually what we use is a genogram. A genogram is like a pictorial representation, or it's a family tree. It's a family tree where we draw out the relationships. So this is the family tree, or the so-called genogram of the person that we have discussed before about the case. We have discussed about the case scenario. So this is a genogram of the person. I will be explaining to you how to read the genogram. The boxes or the squares, it says it represents male, and the circle represents female. And the lines joined, that shows that they are married to each other. And the striped one, Mrs. A, the striped one indicates the patient, and the boxes which are crossed, it means they are died. So they are no more, they are passed away. That is what is meant by this particular genogram. And from the lines, we usually use lines to indicate the relationships in the family. So as I have told, Mrs. A is having a very hostile relationship with both her children, and also she is having a quite normal relationship with her brother's wife. She just have a single, so Mrs. A's parents are dead, and her husband passed away. Her brother, he passed away. And they have, the circle around Mrs. A indicates that she is living alone. The circle is drawn. If Mrs. A was living with her children, then the circle would have drawn together. So that is what usually happens. So this is how a genogram is being read. I hope you have a little bit idea. If you have any doubts, you're free to ask.
Could you please just repeat this once again about the genogram, the definitions of each thing?
Sure. So a genogram, it's a pictorial representation of the family. It's a family tree. The square boxes represents male, and the circle represents female. The cross, the patient is being represented using the striped lines. Look at Mrs. A, where we have used the stripes on it. So that is how we represent a patient in that family in the genogram. And the cross that is drawn on the circles and square indicate that the patient, that they are no more. They have passed away. That is what is indicated by the cross symbol over each boxes. And inside the box, what we can write is the age of a person. It can be written inside the circle. That is why we have written Mr. C is 36, Mrs. C is 33. That is the age of the person. And then name will be there under every boxes. What is the name of that particular person? And then below that, we can give the occupation. What is he doing or what is she doing? That can be written below that. So that is how we draw a genogram. And in that genogram, what we can do is like we can mark the relationship that we are having. Relationships are usually drawn. You can use the the other color. The red color is actually drawn to show the relationship that is existing between the family members. So for Mrs. A, the dotted lines, it represents that they are having a hostile relationship. So as I have mentioned, Mrs. A is having a hostile relationship with her son, Mr. C, and her daughter, Mrs. D. And the line, the straight line, which is a very thin line that is drawn from Mrs. A to Mrs. B, shows that they are having not so good, but they are having a relationship. That is what is having like a positive support is there from Mrs. B. That is what is represented by the single line that is drawn between Mrs. A and Mrs. B. I hope it's clear to you.
Yes, it is clear.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so moving back, I have mentioned that this genogram is practically included in the family overview. And in that family overview, we should also include regarding if whether there is any people in the family having any other illnesses. That should also be a information that has to be collected from the family overview. And primarily, we should also collect an information that who is the primary caregiver to the person. That needs to be addressed and that needs to be acknowledged. So we have to understand that who exactly is the primary caregiver in that family. To the next point, the socio-economic overview. In the socio-economic overview, we usually try to understand what is the income for the family, what is the income source, who is the working member, the primary breadwinner of the family, do they have any debts to be paid off, do they receive any pension schemes that is available for them. In Kerala, we do have a cancer pension scheme where the individuals diagnosed with the cancer will be given 1,000 rupees per month as a pension. And we also do have the central government pensions for the old age, people at old age, for the widows and for the differently abled. So we have to understand whether the person is receiving any pensions. And then we have to understand whether they are their health is covered in some insurance or something. We have to ask for them. We have this Pradhan Mantri health insurance scheme. So in Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, where every individual will be having a benefit of 3 to 5 lakh rupees if they are admitted in the hospital. So we do have to ask such details, whether they are availing the existing supports. Such things have to be explored in the socio-economic overview. The next area is a psychological overview. In the psychological overview, as Nilya ma'am have explained, we do have to understand whether the person is having some depressive kinds of thoughts, or whether the person is going through a grief, whether what are the concerns or worries that the patient is having. Such things have to be included in the psychological overview. It may not be possible at the initial time to understand all these details. The psychological overview or the feelings that the person is having inside will only be known to you when you have a good rapport with them. As time passes, you will be knowing more about the person will be speaking out more to you, and that is how you will be knowing more about the psychological as well as spiritual aspects. And in the spiritual overview, that is how we have to understand. We have to ask them what is the meaning that you associate for your life, the hopelessness, the hopes that she have in life, who is a significant person that you have in your life, what is your happiest moment in your life, what do you like to celebrate, do you wish to have any great moments in your life, what is your wishes. Such things can be included as part of the spiritual overview. And in the psychosexual overview, that is also an area that has to be explored, but usually it doesn't explore because in most of our culture we doesn't speak about that, and people doesn't feel like speaking more about that if the person is completely a stranger to them. So such issues have only been discussed only after a good rapport with them. When we get to know more about the person, when we have a good relation with them during the frequent visits, they'll be trying to vent out their feelings. They'll be expressing their feelings to us, like where they have such and such issues with her partner, or there are such issues going on in the family. So these types of issues are also areas to be explored, and based on that, the referrals have to be made, and properly they have to be connected to us, to a psychologist or a person concerned. So as individuals, these are the areas that we have to remember or keep in mind when we are assessing a person. And based on this, we plan we make plans, and based on that, we do intervention. This is what is the total process of assessment and intervention. So as I have mentioned in that genogram, this is just a representation of how we draw the emotional relationships. So that the single line is a plain or normal relationship. The zigzag line shows the hostility, then emotional abuse, neglect. So in genogram, we can actually use these lines to express the emotional relationships. Moving on to another important feature that we all need to know is an eco-map. Eco-map, it was developed by Anne Hartman. An eco-map is a pictorial representation like genogram. But when it comes to eco-map, what happens is that it helps to visualize the social and personal relationship of individuals with the environment, not with the family, but with the external or the larger society. That is what is represented in an eco-map. It's like a snapshot view where we draw the interactions that the individual is having with other systems. It may be the groups, it can be the organizations, it can be the associations in the community, it can be the community members. All these people and all these external or the larger society may have relationship with the particular person. So that interactions is what is represented in an eco-map. See, for example, this is a kind of eco-map where in the middle it comes the family unit, and look at the other circles. These are the areas where a particular person, for example, say for all of us, we all are connected to all these systems somehow or the other. Maybe we are having a positive relationship, maybe we don't have a positive relationship. It depends. But we do have an external society to which every individual is connected. It can be the neighbors we are having, the workplace relationships, any systems, or we are availing any government service systems or schemes, whether we are availing any community services, then are we receiving any help from the religious institution? Because there are religious institutions which offer like a for charity, they do help the individuals. So we just have to understand whether they do have a help from the religious institution. Then it can be friends, it can be the clubs that is there in the locality. Then if there are children in the family, if the school is related to them, are the teachers connected to them? Then if you have a community volunteers, are they connected to the family? So this is how an eco-map looks like, where the individual is being connected to the entire the external society. And in this eco-map too, we will be using lines to represent the type of relation that they are having. The single line represents a positive relationship. The dotted lines shows that it's a tenuous relationship. The zigzag line shows that it's a stressful relationship. And the arrows, look at the arrows. There are arrows pointing to both sides, and there are arrows pointing to just one side. So that means the energy flow. Who is helping whom? How was they benefited? So that is what is you mentioned in using the arrows. And the line thickness, see in that Greg is having a very, there is a thick line drawn from counselor to Greg. So that means that they do have a very strong relationship. So the intensity is actually represented through the thickness of the lines. So this is how an echo map should look like. So from this, would you like to say why exactly we need to understand the echo map of a person? Why do we need to trace out an echo map of a person?
Madam, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
So just wanted to know, what is tenuous? Can you give an example of a tenuous kind of relationship?
Okay. So in this picture, Louis is having a weak relationship with Greg. That is her son. So that means that they don't have a proper good relationship. Maybe they'll not be talking to each other. They live in a single house, but they don't talk to each other. Even if Lucy is having a problem, Greg won't be interfering in any of the matters. So, but it's not mean that he is completely hostile to them, but he doesn't care about it. He just have a very weak relationship with the son.
Okay.
That is what is
Thank
meant
you.
by tenuous.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was asking, why should we trace out an echo map of a person? If we understand the echo map of a person, is there a use for us? Does anyone have any thoughts about it?
It will be very easy to understand the family structure of the patient.
Also,
Okay.
we can find out from where they can, what resource can be used to help them.
Exactly.
And, yeah, and what also, which are the areas that maybe some people, a counselor or somebody can work on to help them to resolve those issues, other issues.
Yes, exactly. So thank you so much. And would anyone anyone else like to comment on it?
I think it helps us to trace the root of the stress or the damage from where it is radiating into a person's life.
Exactly, very true. That is also really true. Because from an echo map, what we understand is that, okay, let's see, we are trying to help the particular family. Who are the supports? Who are the persons or individuals who support this particular family? We'll be getting to understand from that. Okay, who are the people whom we should never ask for support? Already they are having a hostile relationship with this particular area, and we should as individuals who are new to this particular family, if we get to know about such an information from them prior, we'll never be going to that particular area, right? Also, there is also we will be getting to understand that there is intense relationship between this particular person and this particular area. So if we really need to understand more about the family, we can go and collect more information from that. We can use it as a collateral source. That is a possibility. Then from the individuals who are offering support, they are the resources for this particular family. So as individuals, if they are in need of a support, the first person that we can go and ask for help may be this individual who is offering a support. So from the echo map, when we draw it, we will be understanding which are the areas to be intervened upon, where is the resource coming from, where we can reach out for the first time if we are in need of a help for that particular family. So that is how an echo map really works on. This is a small echo map of the individual that we were talking about regarding Mrs. A. So from the initial understanding, what we really understood was that she was supported from the public health center. She was often visited from their palliative care, and church was helping her to pay the rent. They were providing ₹1,000 every month for her as a support for paying off her rent. Then she never had a proper relationship with neighbors because she was not of a good help to them. She was having fracture. She herself was dependent. For a person who is always depending on another person, most of the neighbors, they don't like it. So for her, unfortunately, her neighbors didn't have a proper good relationship with her. And regarding the panchayat, it was there, but it didn't, the panchayat, it means the local self-government body. it didn't provide much support to Mrs. A because Mrs. A was frequently shifting from one place to another. So no local self-government was knowing her properly. She stays at one place and she moves to other place because of this rent issue. She was living in rented house, and once the individual sent her away from that particular house, she moves to another one. So as there was such situation, the panchayat couldn't do much help for a person as she was not a permanent resident of that particular area. Then from palliative care, she was also receiving proper support from palliative care. So I'll be moving back to the previous case that we have discussed, and from the discussion, you have arrived at many points, and that is already that is what is being included in this. And you have discussed and you have come up with many more points that are yet to be added in this. So assessment along all the parameters, it revealed that for that lady that we were discussing about, physically, as you all mentioned, she was in pain. She was having fatigue. Lack of sleep was a problem. As she was having fracture, she was having difficulty in walking. And also as a woman who lost one of her breasts, she was having body image issues. So physically, these was the issues that comes under. And psychologically, as everyone said, for a person living alone, isolation and loneliness is primarily, it's a problem. Emotionally, she was very weak because she never had anyone to talk with. She never have any significant person in life to talk with. So that was actually causing stress or emotionally weak to her. She was anxious about her future. Where would I end up? Who will look after me? So such anxiety was there for her. She was unclear about her prognosis, and she doesn't know whether what will be happening in next. So such clarity issues were there with her. And regarding palliative care, in the beginning, she was not aware about what exactly was palliative care. And psychologically, she was having distress due to her multiple illness. In the socioeconomic area, she was having a very strained relationship with her family. She was unable to go for any job. Financial instability was there. House rent was a serious issue for a person who doesn't have a proper income. Low accessibility to hospital. If she have to go to a hospital, she has to depend on someone else. So she will not be able to go by herself. So that was a problem that she had. Then absence of caregiver and a proper support system was a problem in the socioeconomic part. In the spiritual area, as you have most of you have mentioned, there was extreme spiritual distress, because for a person who have multiple illness coming in, they'll be definitely thinking that why all this have happened to me? Why me? So that is a question that we usually don't be able to explain to them. So such questions will be there from them. Then there was loss of faith in God, because like people in here, they think that I was a very good believer of God, then why God has made this happen to me? So such questioning happens, and they will be reducing their faith in God. And loss of connection with friends and families. No significant person in life, no memorable or joyful events. As many have discussed, she never had anyone to wish her on birthdays. She never attended any social functions. So she doesn't have any particular memorable, joyful moments in her life. So such things was causing distress to her. So these are the areas that we understand through a proper assessment and proper discussions. So coming to the possible social impacts of a illness or a disease is that it can create social isolation. It can cause dependency. There are people who are completely dependent on others for doing their activities of daily living. Think about it, like for an individual who is unable to go to bathroom by himself, who is unable to brush by himself, who is unable to dress up by himself. So such dependency is creating, or is actually creating a loss of dignity for them. So such issues happen as part of illness. Financial instability is it's a great problem that most of the individuals are affected by. lack of proper social support, deaths that is caused either due to treatment or other medicine expenses, then loss of work, the interpersonal issues that happens within the family, inadequate facilities. It may be inadequate facilities or to go to a hospital, or inadequate facilities at home, lack of accessibility to the proper like lack of accessibility to basic amenities like food, water, shelter. So inadequate facilities, all these things can be a possibly the impacts of social impacts of a particular illness. The possible psychological impacts that happens as part of the illness is a feeling of shock, uncertainty, or hopelessness. A shock in the sense for an individual who gets to know that he is having a particular illness, it creates a shock. Hearing a bad news for the first time, which was like unexpected, it creates a shock, an uncertainty, and a hopelessness in one's own life. An anticipatory grief. What will be happening? What will happen to my kids? How will they live on? If I am no more, how will my family move forward? So such and such anticipatory grief will be there. Poor insight is also a problem. Anxiety that is created due to all this sufferings, that is also an issue. Suicidal ideations can happen. If I'm completely dependent on other person, or if I'm completely a burden to my family, why should I leave? So such questions comes in, and they'll be thinking about we have been hearing individuals speaking like, if I am no more, my family will have a better life. So they have such thoughts because they do care for their family so much, and they don't want their loved ones to consider himself as a burden. So such situations are also part and parcel of a particular illness. Poor coping with illness, that is also a part of or a psychological impact that can create stress to the entire family. So what from this we have to understand is that the psychosocial and spiritual sufferings, they are actually real, but it is very hard or it is difficult to recognize and treat them. But what happens is that all these sufferings, it manifests as physical pain, which we will be treating mostly by medications. But think ourselves, is that situation requiring a medication or an external support? So that is where we as volunteers, as healthcare professional comes in. We do have to try to understand as listeners, as a friend, as a person whom they can rely upon. We do have to try and understand, listen to them, help them ventilate their suffering, help them direct them to move on, and help them to improve their quality of life through our presence. So that is what as professionals or as individuals we can offer to them. Just mentioning about some vulnerable populations that you will be coming across who requires special care. Individuals who are living alone, the elderly living without support, single parents, like families which are having multiple patients in the family, individuals who are the victims of gender issues like domestic violence, then individuals with mental health issues, individuals with suicidal ideations, socially isolated individuals, then substance users in family, individuals who are living in extreme poverty, who are having lack of food, water, shelter, etc. So such individuals. So all these individuals comes under the vulnerable populations. If you come across such individuals, what you can do as volunteers or health workers is that you can help them reach out to a resource, or you can help them navigate them to a particular resource where they can receive help. If you are able to provide a help to them, do support. If you are not, refer them or help them to reach out to a person who is actually providing that particular support. That is what we as individuals can do. Speaking about caregivers, it is the caregivers are the population that usually we don't usually care about. And what I have to mention is to just respect them, those individuals, and acknowledge their So I was saying that the caregivers are the populations that usually unnoticed. The caregivers are usually called as the invisible patients. We usually call them as invisible patients because they don't usually get recognized often. But think about, if you are thinking about them, these caregivers are individuals who are sparing their entire life, who are sparing their social life that they actually have. All their luxuries are being sacrificed upon for caring this particular person. So these caregivers have to be recognized, they have to be respected, and we should never dehumanize them by calling us bystanders. Bystanders is a person who just stand nearby, but caregivers are not individuals who stand and look at them. They are individuals who spend most of their time giving care to them, sacrificing all their needs. So we do have to give a good respect to such individuals. So whenever we meet a person, we do have to acknowledge the caregivers too. I would like to share with you a beautiful quote that was shared by Rosalind Carter that says that there are only 4 kinds of people in this world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need a caregiver. I hope it needs no more explanation. It's well written and it's very clear about how exactly the role of caregiver should be remembered in our life. Just speaking about dignity, as individuals, we have to take care of and we have to ensure dignity of every individual. We should never go and try to help a person until and unless they ask for it. Because in situations, what happens is that for a differently abled person, as from kindness, what we do is like we do help them without them being asked. But for an individual who is on a wheelchair, or who is let's say a person with differently abled, they do have a dignity and they have the capability of doing certain things. Unless and until they ask for a help, we should never let them a help. That is kind of respecting their own dignity. That is, before giving a help, do ask them. That is something that you have to always remember in our minds. And just speaking about the A, B, C, Ds of dignity, it is our attitude, behavior, the compassion with which we work, and the dialogues or the communication that we have. It matters a lot in the matter of dignity. Regarding communication, you will be having a detailed session tomorrow. And as in palliative care, communication is a very important factor that you should always keep in mind, and that will be always remembered when you are out for a home care visit or you have a conversation with individuals. So all these things, the attitude with which we approach a person, the way we behave to them, it includes the verbal as well as the non-verbal communications that we have, the compassion with which we work, and the conversations that we have, that have to be ensuring that we are keeping the dignity of the individual. So the single question that we all have to understand is, what do I need to know more about you to help you better? That is the crux of all these assessments. The only thing is that we as individuals would love to help the other person. And the question which gets us the answer of all this question is, what do I need to know more about you to help you better? So this is a picture, we would like to share a picture of one of our beneficiary who celebrated his birthday, who celebrated his anniversary, wedding anniversary, when he was in the deathbed. So it was one of his greatest wish to celebrate his wedding anniversary. That is something that he have mentioned in one of the conversations very randomly, but we have taken it as an occasion where we could see the smile on the face of both persons. So this was a celebration. We would like to share this picture, and the picture was put on this with the consent of the family. And from all my session, from the above all session, what we tried to mention is regarding the intervention that we can do. So as individuals, what we can do is provide information. as and when required. If it is like as individuals who have the luxury to access all the medias, if we have an idea regarding the new systems or new schemes that is available, we can provide information to them. So information providing or information dissemination is one of the function that we can do. Liaison or connecting them with the resources is what we can do. Facilitating them. So there may be individuals who will not be able to go to all this and who will not be able to go with and do all these activities by themselves. So at that times, what we can do is like we can facilitate them and we can help them and navigate them through the path where they have to go and reach out to a particular resource that is available. And coming to rehabilitation, if required, it can be social rehabilitation, vocational rehabilitations, such physical rehabilitations can be done. They can be connected to systems where they will be getting the physical aids and all. Such connections can be arranged by us. Then we can do the psychoeducation. That is more of an education part where you can seek help from the hospital or from the organization that you are working with, because maybe as individuals you may not be having a clear idea about what exactly is the disease condition, how the medications have to be given, and how the proper care can be done. So if you don't actually know about such details, you can seek the help of a primary health center or a nurse in charge or a doctor in charge to give proper education to this individual. A supportive counseling can be provided, like as and when a person is required. A supportive counseling, being with them, listening to them, providing suggestions for them. It's not advising them to do this and this, but we can provide suggestions to them. If you could do like this, it can be better, or we can help them come up with solutions. So being with them as a listener can offer an effect of us like supportive counseling. And if you really find that the person is in requirement of a real counseling as such, they have to be referred to a counseling psychologist. Then proper follow-ups can be done. It can be rather phone follow-ups or home visits. And bereavement support. Bereavement support is that in palliative care, we always say that the care doesn't end by the death of the person. As we do care about the family, the care continues even after the death of the person. A bereavement support is provided where the bereaved person, if the spouse is dead, so the wife will be taken care of. So we'll be calling them. We will be asking them how they are coping with the situation. Are they able to come over that? Are they in the grief? So such and such support will be provided. That is what is a bereavement support. And you require more knowledge regarding bereavement support to understand what exactly are the things that are to be asked and that are not to be asked. So that will be covered mostly in detail in the communication session, and sharing with you some vocational rehabilitation pictures that we have provided. So vocational rehabilitation is where the spouse of the individual will be provided with a vocation that they are interested in. We'll be asking them, or if they are coming up with something that they would like to do, we'll be helping them to get that. So we have provided sewing machine for those who are interested in tailoring, and we have taught some who make candles to make umbrellas. Then few of them, they come up with ideas of god rearing and hen, chicken, poultry farms. And if they are interested in that, we support them even through the through the local self-government or through other sponsors who are ready to support them. So that is how we do the vocational rehabilitations. And for the support of children, we do have to provide the educational and emotional support to the children in that family. So for us, what we can do is like there are existing scholarships that are available. So if the children are not aware about such scholarships, maybe we can connect them or we can help them to register to such and such scholarships, and we can help them providing emotional support, help them try to understand what exactly is the condition their parents or their siblings are going through. Such emotional or the educational supports can be provided to children as well. So now we'll be showing a small video of our support groups. So we have provided vocational rehabilitation to our beneficiaries. So we'll be sharing with you a video where we have clubbed all this together.
Today, we see around us many bedridden patients who have lost hope for a better life. Abandoned by conventional medicine systems, they live their lives dependent on the care of their near and dear ones. Globally, 80% of this care is provided by women. Often, women caregivers neglect their own health and well-being in the care of others. Families also fall into extreme poverty because of the illness of the main income earner, the male. Dependent women are left without any means to survive. The Pallium India Trust recognized this crucial need for women caregivers to be supported. With the financial help of the Women's Wing of the Federation of Malayali Associations of America, Pallium India Trust is extending a helping hand to one of the most neglected sections in society, women caregivers. Shaila has faced misfortune upon misfortune. While her husband was stricken by cerebral vascular accident, she lost her 22-year-old son in a motorbike accident. Despite these debilitating events, Shaila faces life with unusual courage. Once again, Pallium India reached out and is supporting Shaila to rebuild her life.
Pallium India, അവരെല്ലാവരും ടീമംഗങ്ങൾ എല്ലാവരും എനിക്ക് ഭയങ്കര സപ്പോർട്ടീവാണ്. ശരിക്കും പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഞാൻ ഇന്ന് അങ്ങോട്ട് മുന്നോട്ട് പോണത് തന്നെ എനിക്ക് അവരെ സപ്പോർട്ടുള്ളത് കൊണ്ടാണ്. എല്ലാ രീതിയിലും എല്ലാവരും ഭയങ്കര ഇതാണ്. എല്ലാവരും എൻ്റെ അടുത്ത് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്, ഏത് സമയത്ത് എന്തൊരു ഇത് വന്നാലും ഒരു കോൾ ചെയ്താൽ മതി, അപ്പോൾ അവരെത്തുമെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. അത് തന്നെയാണ് എൻ്റെ ജീവിതത്തിലെ പ്രതീക്ഷയും.
Vijay Kumar and Vijay Kumari are siblings affected by an autoimmune disease. Now, at 34 and 36 years, their only caregivers are their elderly parents. While Pallium India provides them with home care facilities, which takes care of their medical needs, their elderly mother needed an extra income to support the family. ₹30,000 was given to Jainamma. She continues caring for the children from home. Rashmi has another story to tell. Her husband Biju is confined to a wheelchair after a spinal injury. Rashmi set up a small garment business with which she managed to run the household. But the huge costs of the medical treatment for Biju and subsequent deaths forced her to stop the business. Through FOMA, she was given a grant of rupees 30,000. With this, Rashmi was able to restart her small garment business. Loneliness and helplessness are one of the biggest challenges of old age. 60-year-old Sarojini Amma and her chronically ill 70-year-old husband are facing this problem. A small tea shop is her means of earning a livelihood. Pallium India, recognizing the need to help her with more vessels, etc., became the ray of hope in Sarojini Amma's life. We have just seen 4 stories among the many that the Pallium India Trust has affected through timely aid and care. These women devote their lives to others, but is there anyone to think of them? For many women who feel there is no way out, the rebuilding and concern of these lives by Pallium India Trust becomes an inspiration and motivation.
So what you have seen is how we as a team could be a ray of hope in many individuals' life. So this is one among our project, which is a woman empowerment project, where we actually help them for vocational rehabilitation. So with this, I would like to end my presentation, and do always remember that whenever we have our interventions, please do evaluate our intervention, and we have to assess whether how our patients and the families are benefited. We do have to revise and update all our interventions. We have to reach out for the help if required, even for us and even for our patients. And once again, to end, I would like to mention a quote that was given by Mahatma Gandhi. That is, the difference between what you do and what you are capable of doing will solve most of the world's problems. I repeat, the difference between what you do and what you are capable of doing will solve most of the world's problems. Thank you so much for listening, and happy to listen to your questions.
So time for question. Yeah, Abhijit.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask when in categorizing the person's health, yeah, are we categorizing the emotional well-being under the psychological? I mean, shouldn't that be a different category? That's just one thing, and the other thing is, how do we, when we gather all this information about their relationships and all of that, and when there are challenges that the person is not willing to open up, how do we get that information in that case? Yeah, that's all.
So thank you for the question. Regarding the first question, what you have said is true. We are categorizing this emotional aspects in these heading under the psychological concept. We are including this emotional aspects that the person is going through. And for the second question,
Yeah, we can't hear you, ma'am.
I'm sorry, we lost a moment. Could you please repeat that second question, please?
Yeah, basically, some of these things about for a person like that woman having a hostile relationship with the children, or having suicidal thoughts of some sort. So these are extremely personal things. So how do we get that information out of that person, and then is it, how do we ethically use that information then to encourage support from the EcoMap system? I just wanted some clarity on that.
Okay, so that is where the communication comes in, I must say. So in communication, we do have steps of rapport building. So how we do start a conversation with them, because it's obvious that for a stranger, we'll never be able to open up to that particular person. So that is where this rapport or proper communication comes in. The way we ask questions, if it is like an authoritative way, what the response will be like, it's like a question answer session. We'll not be having a proper information seeking, or will not be able to understand the concerns of a patient or help them. Rather, if we are having a proper idea about how the communication has to be, how our postures have to be, how our non-verbal communication have to be, our gestures, our facial expression, the eye contact, the tone with which we talk. So all these things matters to the person who is listening. So when we have a proper knowledge about how do we communicate to a particular person, that is, initially we start up with a conversation in introducing ourselves and what and why we have come to that particular person. We have to explain it to them. We'll try to understand about the family as such. What exactly are they doing? It's like a casual conversation that we'll be having. It's not like an authoritative or very formal one. Rather, we'll be having an informal conversation where our requirement is not to explore all details. It's not like exploring so much details and it is like a fixed thing to give a proper intervention. It is like we are there to help the person. So that compassion has to be there even in our conversations too. If we have such a mind, the person will be getting such a feeling that, okay, this person is listening to me and the person is here to help me with something. If a person gets that feeling, and if we are successful enough to give a person that feeling in the sessions that we have with that person, in the frequent meetings that we have, slowly they'll be starting to open up to you, and slowly day by day they'll be explaining to you about their problems that they are going through. As I have mentioned, it is not possible to get the information at the initial or first meeting. It will only be possible after few sessions that you have with that particular person. Only after you have a proper rapport with this person, you will be able to understand more of psychological or psychosexual details of a particular person.
Right. Thank you so much.
Okay, sir. If you do have questions, you can either unmute yourself and speak, or you can put in the chat box.
Yeah, so I did understand what you explained about us trying to volunteer in our own communities. But I have a little bit. I tried to reach out to some people in Mumbai, but I was not able to. I was not successful actually in being able to say that I would like to volunteer with you. It didn't work out, maybe because of the COVID time and everybody is really very busy. But it is at this time that I feel that maybe we can lend a helping hand. So if we can be actually, if like you are an organization who can give all this backup support to anybody that you can go to, anybody that you visit. So like that, if we also can, if you can recommend some organizations that may be willing to take us as their volunteers, and maybe we can shadow someone for 1 or 2 sessions and see how they deal with it, because this is, however well intentioned we are, this is a new thing for us. So if we can see how it is done once with somebody, and then if we can go ahead and do it ourselves, and then we have an organization that is backing us, I think it would be very helpful, Teresa. This is my thought. So like if you can connect, like for example, I'm in Mumbai. So if you say, okay, Zaver, you can reach out to X, Y, and Z, and maybe you can tell them that so-and-so will reach out to you, and then they are willing to accept me as a volunteer with them.
Yeah, ma'am, definitely we will be connecting you to some other organization in your area.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Any more questions?
There was a category called psychosexual behavior. Can you just give 1 or 2 lines of clarification on that? I'm sorry, I was not able to grasp that part.
Okay, so in the psychosexual issues, what we discuss is like, it's about the intimacy issues that may happen for a person due to a particular illness. Because, mostly what happens is that for individuals who have traumatic injuries, who have become paraplegic, where they don't have mobility, even in the lower limbs, or for an individual who have a quadriplegic condition, where they don't have a mobility below neck. So for such individuals, for young individuals, they'll be having this kind of issues with the spouse.
Yeah.
Even the spouse will be expressing such issues. If they are very young, and if they are in such a situation where they are recently married and the spouse is met with an accident where they don't have a proper sexual relationship with the spouse, they'll be having issues with that, and they'll be tending to leave the spouse. So such intimacy issues will be there. And for a person who is a paraplegic or who's having quadriplegia, they'll also be expressing their own concerns and worries regarding this intimacy issues that is going on between the husband and wife. Maybe the wife may not be expressing it to us, but at times the husbands, they speak up with this, because they will not be able to satisfy the needs of the spouse. So such issues can lead to many problems, many doubts within the relationship. So such issues are being addressed in the psychosexual area.
Correct. Yeah, thank you.
May I ask something?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so it's not as a question, but some doubt that I have. The question is that is coming to my mind is that we have a lot of baggage, each one of us. So when we work as a volunteer, it is possible that because of our stereotypical thinking with some presuppositions, which we many times don't even know. So when we talk with a patient or try to assess, that may come in the way, our baggage. So my doubt or my question to you is, the case that we discussed, for example, the woman was, the case, some bullet points were given. That was the case scenario that was described. But all that was coming through in that case scenario was that the woman was a little anxious about, okay. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Sir.
Yeah. So the only thing that I could get from the case bullet points was that she was a bit anxious. However, when we try to assess, if we already have a supposition that she is a person with a lot of problems, and she is, a negative approach if we take, we may miss out the possibility that she is a very strong person. In the sense that, it is not at all that the case that she is, in this particular case, it turned out to be that many of the usual thinking that we may have, came out to be true. But it is possible that if we go with a open or blind attitude that we don't know anything about her, if we try to go and try to assess, we may get a better result, in which case we don't try to have a self-fulfilling prophecy, that is, what we already think we made out to be true, and we didn't help her in fact. Can that happen? I don't know if I made myself clear.
Yes, sir, that is very true, because we all come from different scenario, and maybe we have seen such and such individuals in our lives at some point of time. But so what we do is, like, we do have a judgmental attitude, and we do think, oh, this person might not have such and such issue, because I have seen many individuals with the same issue living a very pleasant life. Then why should this individual suffer a lot, and why should this particular person cry a lot? So such judgments can usually, it is very natural for us to happen such thoughts in our mind. But as you have mentioned, we should never, as individuals who are compassionate enough to help another person, we should never have a judgmental attitude. And a non-judgmental attitude is something that we should always keep in our mind when we go for assessing a new person, or for seeing a particular person, because we have to accept the uniqueness of every individual. The situation is what makes them so. Every individual comes from a different situation, and the situation is actually influencing the particular person's suffering, or the situation in which the person is in. So what we do is, like, we do have to have a proper non-judgmental attitude. And I hope regarding all these things, like non-verbal communication, that will be discussed very clearly in tomorrow's session, which is communication session. Please don't fail to attend, everybody. It will be a very good session with which we'll be able to understand more about communicating properly with every single individual that we meet.
Okay, thank you, madam.
So if that's about it, we'll be winding up the session. Wishing you all a great day, and let's all be a ray of hope to someone in our locality and in our community. Stay safe wherever you are. Wish you a happy day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, madam.